what I have is on June 10th, the Ohio Senate passed legislation aimed at relieving several challenges school districts are facing as they plan for reopening in the 2020-2021 year. Mainly, it's House Bill 164, which was pending in the Senate Education Committee, was amended to include a number of coronavirus-related provisions.
If you're speaking, you can take it off.
Yeah, I'm going. That's kind of stifling.
Yeah.
Where was I? So, they were added to House Bill 164 and approved unanimously by the full Senate. Has this gone back to the House and been approved there?
Not as of yet.
Not as of yet? Okay, so it's going to go back to the House. But it's going to do a number of things. For example, grandfather current preschool special education teachers who do not qualify under the new special education preschool administrative rules. Doing a lot of things with districts that are going to operate under a blended learning model to adopt a remote learning plan to be able to operate in the coming school year. And modifying teacher and principal evaluations for the 2019-20 and 2020-21 school years. Doing a number of things to make things a little bit easier for school districts. Is there anything you'd like to add, Todd, that might apply to our district?
Yeah, I'm pulling up the same report I got. The other thing that helps our district is it provides local flexibility in determining promotion to 4th grade rather than mandates under the 3rd grade reading guarantee. So in the past, you had to have a score or go put a plan in place for the kid to move on. It grandfathers current preschool special education, like you said. Let's see if there's other things that you didn't already cover. Add school psychologists to the list of providers eligible to serve special ed students electronically. Oh yeah, there was a moratorium extended to require install storm shelters, so anybody building new schools, they pushed that off. That was going to add about $1 million to current building projects in other districts. Permitting high school students to use final course grades in lieu of corresponding end of the course exams as they were not administered. Modifying, like you said, the evaluations. And then that's pretty much it.
All right, thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. The next item, 8.2, Butler Tech update.
No report, but we do actually have a meeting tomorrow night,
Okay.
which it's on. You can watch it on Facebook Live.
Okay.
It's 6:30 if you want.
Okay. Next, 10.1, report from any employee organizations.
Yes, so in lieu of the meeting, we did send out communication to our community and our staff members if they had any comments they would like to be presented at the board that they could send them in. So I would like to read the exact emails word for word that were sent to some of you as board members and some to me by myself. So the first one states, I am an inclusion assistant at Colerain High School. I've worked for the district for 7 years. Yesterday, I, along with several other inclusion assistants, received a call from Mr. Fisher letting us know that you will be voting to terminate the inclusion assistants positions in our district. I'm not sure if you are aware of everything that we do, not what is in our job description, but what we actually do every day at school. We are not only there to read tests or to pull kids out for small group testing, we go above and beyond our job description every day. We are in class sitting with the kids, helping them stay focused and keeping them quiet so the classroom teacher can teach and other kids can learn without being distracted. We take out groups of kids to reteach them in the way they can learn, quite often several different ways because each child may need things explained differently. We talk to the students not only about biology and social studies, but about things that are going on in their life. Some of these kids have no one else to talk to. We listen to them, laugh with them, even cry with them. These kids need us. We correct them, discipline them, walk the halls with them until they calm down. We give them pens, pencils, folders, notebooks, even book bags to make sure they have all the supplies they need to be successful. On top of all of that, we assist the classroom teacher with things they need help with. When we were out of school for the virus, we were required to do some online work and the things on Google Classroom, that was all. However, several of us that I know of, including myself, were emailing the kids that we work with, seeing if they needed any help on work, getting caught up, helping them learn the material. All because these kids mean a lot to us, not because we were required to, but because we wanted to. As you see, we are far more than test readers. I feel that we are a very important part of the students' education and time here at school. When you consider terminating our positions, please just take this into consideration. Maybe instead, think of eliminating or reducing the amount of in-service days classified workers are required to attend, possibly reduce hours, a pay freeze, reduce the amount of contracted days. There has to be an answer. I know budgets are tight. I have a tight household budget that I have to do and stick with. But there are always options rather than cutting positions. Thanks for taking time to read my email, and please consider this when voting on Monday. I love my job and working at Colerain High School. The next email is from an inclusion assistant at Colerain High School. Hello, gentlemen. Or no, I'm sorry, that was the inclusion assistant at Colerain High School. The next one, hello, gentlemen. I am an intervention assistant at Struble, and Trey Richmond contacted me yesterday about the reduction in staff, that there are 19 other intervention assistants in the district, and you will be letting 10 of us go. I totally understand that it is a money issue, but it makes no sense to me, and I am sure some of the others, but I don't know for sure, that during this past year, we couldn't always help all the students who needed our services due to the high numbers and trying to keep group sizes small. If more than 6 or 7, it defeats the purpose. When students return, there will be many more who will need the remediation due to COVID-19 and being at home for 2.5 months. I'm sure there are a number of students who kept up with their studies, but I'm equally sure there are many who did next to nothing for various reasons. Many of these were probably already helping last year, so they will certainly need help this coming year. And there will probably be some other students who were borderline last year and who may need help to catch up as well. I guess my question is, how will you ever get these students caught up and move on when you are letting so many of us go? I don't know what the other aides or assistants may also be cut, but there has to be some way to keep some of us. I do realize this is a huge dilemma, perhaps some pay cuts. I would rather work for less money than not have a job. Or we can only work 3 days a week at the pay we have now. Just some thoughts. Thank you for your hard work and for reading this. The next one, Mr. Bowling, my thoughts about the importance of recess. I have willingly chosen to be a recess monitor for 7+ years at Colerain Elementary. I have also been office staff, aide, and wherever they choose to send me. Growing up, my memories always were how much fun we had playing outside. I think this year should be how can we safely let them be kids and have playtime. Teachers and other staff members will be stretched thin, and 5 elementary recess monitors will probably not break the bank on the budget. We could spread recess out so less students on playground at a time. We could, during other times, be utilized to help deliver breakfast, help the custodians, or be an extra hand for teachers. What I feel I offer is to creatively and innovatively give them a sense of normalcy. If you ask a child what his favorite part of the day is, it is always recess. Yes, teachers could bring them outside, but having a person that is passionate and creative to orchestrate a safe recess experience is priceless. We are all stressed out and anxious, and I am an adult. What could these little kids be thinking? I know hard choices have to be made. Not sure you have been to Colerain Playground lately and seen all the activities we have painted and seen all the games and toys that we have for kids. We take recess seriously. Just my thoughts, and I thank you for taking time to listen. A lot of life skills and memories are made on something as simple as recess. Thanks and be safe. To the district administrative team and Northwest Local School District School Board. The counseling staff at Colerain and Northwest High School were made aware that one of the budget cut proposals is to eliminate the extended day contracts for school counselors. Before a final decision is made, we felt it was our responsibility to make all parties aware of the work that our 2 departments do in 10 days leading up to the start of the school year and the 3 days that are used to close out the year. We feel that this time is so desperately needed and we deserve to be paid for the work that we do. If all of this work is backed up to the first day of school, it will create a very rocky and chaotic start to the school year. To ask us to still work these days and to be offered 13 trade days during the school year as our compensation for our time simply won't work. Our students, parents, teachers, and administrators need us to be there for them on a daily basis during the school year. To be out for almost 3 weeks during the course of the year does not seem fair to those that we serve. We realize we are in unprecedented times and the state budget cuts were completely unexpected, but we feel compelled to share our work with all of you. We implore you to take the information we are sharing with you today into consideration when making final decisions on the proposed budget cuts. Work completed in the 10 days leading up to the start of school. Each counselor does a credit check for all of the seniors, juniors, and sophomores on their caseload, approximately $250 per counselor, since our 9th grade students are not included in this total. Each counselor checks every schedule for the entire 350 student caseload to make sure that they have all of their required courses, they have a full schedule, they are not repeating any courses, and check athletic eligibility. Personally, meeting with our new enrollees and their families to welcome them to Colerain High School, Northwest High School community, provide them with information about our school and all that we have to offer. Work with the student and their family to create a schedule for the upcoming school year and provide a tour of our facilities. In addition to this 30-minute meeting, we will spend additional time tracking down the students' transcripts, records from the previous school, since many of them do not come to the enrollment meeting with records despite the efforts of our enrollment department requesting this information. In any given school year, each counselor could have anywhere from 25 to 50 new enrollees that need to be processed prior to the school year starting. Respond to emails and voicemails from parents and students regarding the start of school and schedules prior to the first day of classes. In addition, responding to counselors and administrations from other districts inquiring about students from our district who recently enrolled in their district. Balancing class sizes for courses that are too small or too large. Moving students from different levels, such as from Algebra 1A to Algebra 1, based on new information we receive. Creating plans for seniors who are at risk because of testing or credits. Creating ILPs, individual learning plans, student learning plans, for students in need of a credit recovery course or courses. Reviewing each 504 plan to make sure they are correctly scheduled and are able to receive their accommodations. Emailing teachers the 504 plan for students who have one and collecting signatures from teachers letting us know that they have read them. Scheduling students who unexpectedly return from Butler Tech. Creating a schedule from scratch for students who somehow didn't have a schedule run for them. Consulting students on scheduling courses for College Credit Plus and completing credit verification forms. Reviewing all on and off campus CCP courses to ensure that the student is not over the 30-hour requirement so they do not incur any unexpected fees due to any overages. Preparing for Frost Fest, our 9th grade day only. Preparing for counselor-led meetings, activities that are carried out during the first few days of school for all grade levels. Follow up on children's home services for incoming and current students. Work completed during the 3 extended days at the end of the school year. Review student course failures and contacting parents in order to get students registered for summer school. Review transcripts of the 350 plus students on our caseload to ensure all students are meeting graduation requirements. Creating plans for those students who are not meeting graduation requirements. Working with our CCP partners on student rosters and student eligibility for the CCP program. Working with our EMIS coordinator on graduation codes, student memberships, and graduation data that is reported to the state each year for our district report card. Uploading the final transcripts to the NCAA NAIA portal for student athletes. If any of these things are rushed, here are some potential issues that could be encountered. Students are scheduled for wrong classes and don't have what they need to graduate. For example, if a senior doesn't have a PE or a freshman who somehow didn't get scheduled into English. Students get missed for athletic eligibility. New enrollees and their parents are upset when students aren't able to start on day one. They miss valuable information about rules, dress code, lockers, etc. ILPs are incorrect and students complete the wrong credit recovery courses. Parents and students who don't get returned phone call or email within an hour are calling admin and central office to complain. Classes are not balanced on the first day, causing frustration for teachers and students who have to be moved out of one class and into another. Students are not in appropriate levels of classes on the first day. not meeting expectations of customer service for ourselves and our families. We just wanted you to be aware of how our extended days are used and the potential ramifications if we are not given an appropriate amount of time to complete this important work. It is also important to consider that being away from our building 13 days during the school year takes us away from providing valuable programs and services for our school community. If further discussion is needed, please do not hesitate to reach out to any counseling staff at Colerain and Northwest High School. And that summarizes everything that came from employee organizations.
Any comments? I just have one. We have a deficit that we have to take care of, and there's no way around that. The thing that I've always kind of challenged Todd and Daryl on is collaborating with the staff that are in front of our kids. And I say that as a challenge just because I always want it on the front burner. Because as all of you are aware, there's multiple layers of educating our kids, and there's needs that go way beyond than what we as a board, we hear. And so we need that feedback. So I appreciate when people email and go, hey, this is actually my job. It may not match everything on my job description, but this is what we do. And it is an invaluable amount of knowledge that, I mean, this is my third year on the board, so there's not a day goes by I don't learn something new about our school district. So my challenge to everybody, AO staff, frontline staff that are in front of our kids, speak up so that everybody is aware, because I don't know if you guys are completely aware of everything that they do. I would imagine that every building has their own flavor of some sort, and it's our responsibility to kind of create a common denominator between all of them, and we've talked about that. But we also have to respect and try to cater to the dynamics of each building, because it's a different group of kids. It could be different mix of all different things. So this is round one of cuts this year. There'll be a round two, depending on what the state is going to lay on us. So my challenge to everybody is speak up, let us know what you're doing. Let Todd and Daryl and the team here at the AO know. If you need to reach out to the board for anything, continue to email us like you have. And we take all of this incredibly serious, and none of it is easy. And so, you know, I apologize for the season that we're in right now, but it's unfortunately the necessary evil. And that's all. Community comments? Todd, were there any?
Yes, we had one community comment from Michelle Hill. She sent in 4 questions, so I was going to read each question and then respond.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Bowling. I am interested in hearing at the upcoming board meeting the following. What, if any, changes may be anticipated to resources such as school counselors at the elementary level? Due to social emotional funds from the governor prior to COVID-19, we maintained a counselor at each elementary school. These funds are not general funds and not being offered as a reduction in tonight's reduction recommendations. We also reorganized our music staff and did not replace several positions. These were replaced with additional counselors at our larger elementaries that maintain 850 to 900 students at Struble Elementary, Taylor Elementary, and Pleasant Run Elementary. Her second question, how does Northwest Local School District compare to other districts from percent of budget impacted from state funding? So to give everyone an example, we were reduced 6%, which is equivalent to $1.8 million. Other school districts, Cincinnati Public was reduced $8.7 million, Oak Hills $1.6 million, Princeton $1.4 million, and Sycamore $1.6 million, as the examples I provide. On May 5th, 2020, the governor ordered the Department of Education to reduce state foundation funding by $300 million before the end of fiscal year 2020, which ends on June 30th. Based on the target of reducing state foundation funding by $300 million, a statewide per pupil reduction amount of $317 adjusted based on the local wealth and capacity of each district was computed. The reductions range from $88.76 per pupil for the districts with the lowest local capacity to $304.32 for the districts with the highest local capacity. Northwest was reduced $202 per pupil due to the higher wealth and local capacity as determined by the state. Question number 3, aside from a delayed start, what changes are being considered for the calendar for the remainder of the upcoming school year? For now, the delayed start is only in order to provide professional development on safety and structures for our kids as staff reenter and allow teachers to collaborate on lesson planning and be ready for in-person, which is what we're hoping will be released here shortly, or remote learning if we have to. The rest of the calendar will remain the same. So all days will be fulfilled unless we are told to shut down by the governor. Number 4, does offering remote learning impact class size and the number of teachers at each grade level? Remote learning will be offered as an alternative for any family all year long. Without knowing how many will take advantage of this, we cannot predict class size at this time. It could affect the number of teachers at each grade level. So those were 4 questions and then the responses.
Great, thank you, Tom. And thank you for sending the questions in. We love when our community engages with us. 11.1, adoption of superintendent's consent items. Todd?
They're not showing it in front of me. Hold on one second. Here we go. Okay, I apologize for the delay. I'm trying to get it up on my computer. For the adoption of the superintendent's consent items, what is included is our student services handbook. The 2020-2021 student services handbooks are presented for approval. They were presented for information at the May 26th board meeting, and they are listed. And the superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the service handbooks for the school year 2021 as listed.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Are there any questions, comments? Okay, we'll call for a vote. Okay, the vote passes 5-0. The next item on the agenda is the student services handbooks.
Those were what we just
We just
Yeah,
did
have
that.
that, yeah. Okay.
should be operational reductions.
Yep, operational reductions, 13.1.
All right, at this time, Daryl and I are going to do a PowerPoint presentation that the folks at home will be able to see. You have paper handouts in front of you so you can see them. So Chris, if you could pull up slide 1, and we would like to go through the process that was used to come to these reductions and our list of possible recommendations prior to board approval on June 22nd. So Daryl?
So this is about staffing and matching our expenditures and our revenue. So on the introduction slide, we want to share that continued reductions in state funding over the years, and we talked about this when we were talking about funding in conjunction with the levy, that over the course of the last 5 to 10 years, there have been multiple reductions in state funding from the state to the district. That, in conjunction with being flat funded for the last biennium budget, has contributed to us to continue to be in a place where our expenditures are outpacing our revenue. And one of the things that you guys have already mentioned is the upcoming cuts that could be coming because of COVID that we don't even know that are coming yet. The thing that is really important to stress at this point is our needs exceed our revenue. When you listen to the emails that Mr. Bowling read from our staff, you can tell that our needs are there. The passion and commitment of our staff is there. The relationships they have are invaluable. And it's not that we don't need everything that's going to be talked about tonight. The issue is that we don't have the funds to support our needs. And so I want to make sure I'm very clear and explicit in the fact that we're not talking about things we don't need. We're talking about things we can't afford. So our process has been, and Mark, you mentioned needing to engage as we go through this. We've gone through that engagement process multiple times with what do we need to look at when we talk about reductions. And so our building leadership teams met with administration, we met with union representation over the entire previous levy cycle about what is above basic education. We are funded on basic education. What are you legally required to do that it provides basic education to students? Things like gifted education, intervention services are not considered basic by the state. Those are above and beyond. So when we went through our process, it was really about looking at what do we have that's above basic and how do we start making sure that we have equity between buildings. So you also mentioned that, Mark, that we needed to really look at making sure that there's equitable distribution of our resources across our different buildings and that we had that built into our plan. So when we talked about this, we were really looking at our strategic plan as an anchor. What is our goals for the district as outlined in that strategic plan, and our staffing plan? What are the levels of staff and the kinds of staff we have at our buildings? Knowing that when we talk about positions, we're also talking about people, and like the emails delineated, people are more than the position they hold, and they do a lot more than that. But we really wanted to make sure that as we went through and we collaborated around this round of reductions with all of our administrative teams, it was with that lens of revisiting all of the collaboration that we've done in the past, aligning it with our staffing plan to make sure that we have equity, and aligning it to our strategic plan to make sure that we keep our focus on our achievement, our social emotional development of students, our diversity, equity, and inclusivity, our commitment to trust, and our financial stability. So being able to put all of that together. So I'm going to go through and kind of share and give context to a lot of the things that we talked about that are above basic that we potentially could look at reducing.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
When you say administrative teams, example, who that would, is that?
It was our building leadership teams, our building administrative teams, and our district leadership teams.
Okay, so principals for sure and every building
Principals,
are part of this.
yes.
Principals, assistant principals, BLT is the building leadership team, which consists of teachers within each school.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide was about what we considered. So I'm just going to go through some of the things that we considered. We first looked to our current resignations and retirements, and we do that with all of our resignations and retirements to analyze the position that's been vacated, and is it something that we need to replace, or we can look at doing this position differently. So what's listed on here first is stuff that we had as a resignation or retirement that we agreed as a district we would be able to reduce. So a French teacher. We had 2 French teachers at one high school, 1 at another. We had a French teacher resign. That French teacher, when we looked at the numbers in the French program, the French program can be supported by 1 teacher at each building. So that was a attrition that we could make. Northwest High School has 3 tutors. They are hourly employees who are supporting student achievement through working on credit recovery and preparing students for state assessments. And so we had 1 retirement there, or resignation there, so we looked at, we could really kind of look at not replacing that position, and they have 2 left. Corrine High School had a receptionist this year that resigned mid-year, and we did not replace it throughout the year, and they were adjusting their staff to cover that front door, and we agreed that we would not replace that moving forward, and they would continue to work with their existing staff to cover the needs around that front entrance. They also had one of their secretaries who retired, and so we were able to work with them to adjust responsibilities and not replace that. Our director of curriculum retired this year, reorganizing the curriculum department. We were not going to replace that position. We had a retirement from Northwest High School, and the physical education teacher moved into that position. by being able to split someone between the two high schools, we're not replacing that position. And then looking at our contract with our SROs, our school resource officers with Colerain Township, there was a reduction that we looked at there with, we have 2 resource officers at Colerain High School, 1 at Northwest High School, 1 at Pleasant Run Middle School, 1 at Colerain Middle School. We have a district safety and security officer as well as a attendance truancy officer. So being able to reduce the truancy officer and one of the resource officers at Colerain High School, we were reducing that contract.
Can you share what the truancy officer does? Just a few of
Truancy
the
officer
items.
works with Mr. Pining, our enrollment supervisor, and they do residency checks. They look at whether students are enrolled in the district. He also helps Mr. Pining with things like homelessness. So a lot of kind of verifying residency within the district.
Okay.
Who's taken over those duties?
Mr. Pining will continue to do that. If he needs support, then he will pull from the district safety and security officer.
Okay.
And then we also had district office technology assistant that retired, and then we also had a district office receptionist who retired. So that's current reductions based on retirements. Some of those came in very late last week. So those were ones that were going to be reduced through attrition and we were not going to replace. When we look at all other options, I'm going to go through, next slide, and kind of talk through everything that was on the list. And then Mr. Bowling can kind of let you know where we've landed. All of our elementary buildings have an elementary office assistant. This is someone who works in the front office and helps with supervision. As you heard from the one from Colerain Elementary, they do a lot with that time in terms of the development of kids, supervising kids, working with kids, but that's that extra office support to man the front door and the phones, and to help with coverage of supervision. Librarians district-wide, we have 4 librarians district-wide. We have 1 at each high school, 1 that supports the 3 middle schools, and 1 that supports the elementaries. So we don't have to have a certain number of librarians, so we could make adjustments to the roles and responsibilities of those librarians. Colerain High School and Northwest High School are housed at the building and support the specific buildings. The middle school is housed at Colerain Middle, and then the elementary librarian floats among the others. We do have at the middle school and the elementary library assistants who are also in the library who help with the day-to-day operation of the libraries, checking out books, doing inventory, things like that. Middle school guidance secretaries, all of our middle schools have 3 secretaries, a level 5 that works with the finances, and then they have 1 that works specifically with guidance and 1 that works in the front office. Mark, as you said, there's a lot of overlap and between buildings, differing of responsibilities of what each person might do individually. We had 2 resignations at the middle schools, or 2 retirements, I'm sorry, this year from the middle schools from those guidance secretaries. And in collaborating with the middle schools, they said they could really adjust the roles and responsibilities and split it between 2 secretaries instead of 3. So there's potential to reduce that position across all 3 buildings.
And that's another example where Daryl and Brenda and Dustin and myself collaborated with the principals and they made those decisions that they could.
The extra duty days, you heard the counselors talk about theirs at the high school. Our high school and middle school counselors have designated extra duty days, as well as our instructional coaches at the middle school and our district behavioral coach. The extra duty days would be something that the work obviously would still need to be done, so the work that's done prior to school would then give them the ability to take a non-contract day during the school year, and they would work with their building principals on which days would be least impactful for them to be off. So that flexibility, but still maintaining the work, but shifting some of the other things that might have to happen when they're not in the building on those X number of days throughout the year.
Daryl, on the counselors, in the letter that Todd read, or the email that Todd read, they said 13 days. Isn't it only 10 days?
It is 13 for the high schools. The middle schools have less, and the
But did
coaches.
the high school, aren't they required to come in 10 days before school starts?
The counselors had the 13 days. They were not scheduled days. They were able to work with their principal on which days they were. Some might have done 10 before and 3 after. Some might have done 8 before and then 5 after. So there was flexibility in that.
So they're just not getting paid for those 13 days?
Right.
But they're gonna, during the year, they get those 13 days off and don't have to work, is that correct?
Correct. Right now, they get their 185 days, and then they get an additional contract for the extra duty days, and those are paid at their per diem, so their annual salary divided by the number of days they work. So they get that extra contract. So they get 2 contracts. This would take away the second contract and give them flexibility in when they do their 185 days.
Gotcha.
Transportation is something that we have talked about, that right now we transport students at a 1-mile radius. We could change that to a 2-mile radius for transportation and only transport students that are outside of that 2-mile radius.
And that's what the state requires, correct?
We are,
Minimum.
minimum is, yeah, we are above the minimum on that one. That's, again, above basic education. We're offering a service above what we're required to do. Northwest High School continues to have 2 tutors after the one resigned, and so they help with the credit recovery and preparation for students on the state assessments for the state, for the graduation requirements. We could reduce those because those are above and beyond basic education of what we are required to do. We could look at reducing sections in our Spanish like we did for French. By analyzing that, it might shift the number of kids in a class, and it might reduce the number of sections to allow kids to get into Spanish. So that might reduce some of the offerings kids have and might force them into a language that they wouldn't necessarily choose. The next one, the receptionist at our district office. She manages the front, routes calls, and visitors. She's already retired, and so we're not going to replace that position. Corrine High School has a facility manager. The facility manager is an administrator and works with custodial staff, works with the athletics in the building. They also kind of serve as the assistant athletic director. They do a lot of building supervision with events, after schools, with working with the sporting events and the music events to make sure that all of their events are set up, ready to go, schedules. So that person does a lot with the facility management of the building. They're the only building that has that position. Obviously, they're a large building with a lot going on.
Is that worker laid off, or is he going to do something? He or she going to do something else?
If it was reduced, it would be an administrative reduction, and
Okay.
so that would be a reduction of the administrative contract. People who are reduced would then be eligible to reapply for other positions in the district.
That are available?
Yes.
Gotcha.
In our elementary schools, actually in all of our schools, we have something called an alternative learning program. This is a space in the building where students can go for a calm down. They literally can be de-escalated. They work on behavior modification. This space is built to really be that calming space for students to be able to go reset themselves and re-engage in the learning environment as kind of like a detour. They do work with students more intensely at times, where they are working on behavior modification, teaching kids behavioral strategies. And so at the elementary level, we actually have the alternative learning program staff member, but then we added a second staff member because at the elementary level, when kids are in crisis, they typically need someone to guide them to where they're going, whereas at the secondary level, a student in crisis can be directed a little bit more easily, or they can get themselves there. So we had an assistant in that program that would be able to help facilitate the transition of students who might be in crisis there. One of the things we could do is reduce that position. The administrators that we talked to said we understand that that would mean that we're responding and we're getting kids where they need to go, we're intervening. Obviously, it's putting more on people's plates, but at this point, that's what all of this is. Inclusion assistants, you heard from the inclusion assistant at Corrine High School. They do classroom support. Obviously, that's minimum of what they do with the relationships they have. They are working with kids on a daily basis in a classroom, supporting instruction, monitoring students, getting kids back on task, redirecting students, taking them out for a walk if they need to cool down, working with kids on testing accommodations. So there's that level of support for the classrooms from the inclusion assistants. Intervention assistants are only at the elementary level. At the elementary level, we have intervention assistants who support a scripted reading program for students who are struggling below their reading level. Typically, what we do as a district, we said we will support literacy through intervention assistants, and these intervention assistants use this program to support kids who are typically below the 20th percentile in their reading scores. We receive title funds. Title funds are federal funds that are meant to help above and beyond what the district does. So in addition to intervention assistants, we have title funds that support title assistants who then work with the kids above the 20th percentile that this group of staff are not able to get to. By reducing intervention assistants, we would reduce our commitment to the minimum level. So we might go from the 20th percentile to the 10th percentile, and our title funds would then be shifted to support kids above that. So intervention assistants are supporting the reading interventions to elementary students. And that's our district commitment to that role. Next, we have gifted services. Gifted services are not required. We're required by the state to identify gifted students but not serve them. So we could eliminate or reduce gifted services, or we could look at changing the service delivery model that we have. Those are things that would take time to collaborate with parents and teachers around what that service delivery model would look like. We already have kind of a different model at the elementary and the middle school based on the needs of that level of student. So gifted services are something that we could look at in terms of above basic. Custodians, when we review the custodial staff, all of our large elementaries, Pleasant Run Elementary, Taylor Elementary, and Struble Elementary, because of the size of their building, they have a third shift custodian who works overnight. And so we could look at reducing some of that custodial support to the 3 large elementaries, reducing that, and then kind of shifting the cleaning plans among the rest of the custodial staff there.
So what does that staffing look like now then? Would it be, is there a first shift, a second shift, and a third shift?
Right now, then it would just go to first and second shift. There are multiple custodians on each shift, so it would be taking that cleaning plan and distributing it among the rest of the custodial staff in the building. Right now, with all the cleaning that we have to do based on COVID, it's something that we would consider, and Todd can talk about what our recommendation will be with that based on where we are now with our budget and where we are now with COVID, because they intertwine.
Darryl, on the third shift, is there just one custodian?
Just one.
Just one?
It's one per large elementary. In our maintenance department has 2 different kinds of maintenance workers. We have skilled workers, people who have their certification in plumbing, HVAC, electrician. So we have a different set of skills that they bring to the table, and they are doing the work that we would normally outsource. So we also have a set of maintenance guys who are unskilled. They don't necessarily have a trade that they are licensed to do. They're working with the maintenance department and the custodial department, but we have the skilled and the unskilled. One of the things that we have looked at is reducing the unskilled maintenance and maintaining our skilled maintenance, simply because we don't have to outsource, because we have the skilled group who bring the HVAC, the plumbing to the table.
Well, if that's the case, then what does the unskilled maintenance guys do?
They do a lot of work on grounds, they do a lot of moving, they do a lot of heavy lifting, and they're also working in conjunction with the skilled maintenance guys. So when the skilled maintenance are working on jobs, they're typically there assisting and working with them. So it would reduce the amount that they could do in the efficiency, but it's again, when we looked at skilled and unskilled, it was a distinguishment that we looked at in terms of they bring a lot to the table in terms of helping get the work done. The skilled maintenance were able to keep us from outsourcing work,
And they'll pick up that slack.
as well as the custodians in the building who, the unskilled maintenance might be moving a lot of furniture, and now our custodians are going to have to help with that as well. So,
Gotcha.
like I said, everything that we talk about today is going to shift responsibilities because our needs exceed our revenue, and what the people are doing that we're talking about are not superfluous, it's not extra, it's just going to be shifted.
Gotcha.
I think it's important to remember that anybody or any person on this list, it's not about the job they do. Unskilled is a very unkind word. It's just the way it's listed in our contract. They are very skilled at what they do. Their interactions with the custodians, teachers, classrooms, they have trades that none of us can do. It's just when you look at when you're possibly making reductions based because your funding doesn't match your spending, these are the type of things you have to look at.
Well, if you outsource this skilled,
Right.
the cost to outsource it is outrageous. I
Yes.
mean, it's just
Correct.
usually $100 to $200.
Plumbing, electric, HVAC.
So we also have deans of students, and so that's above and beyond basic education. Our deans work directly with our counselors and administrative staff in our buildings to support behavioral interventions for students, social emotional learning. And so, like I said, at the elementary level, they're responding to a lot of those kids in crisis. They're working with the counselors on helping with referrals to children's home and outside resources. So they're part of that central hub of social emotional learning and social emotional development and skill development from that administrative counseling team in the buildings. So that's something that we could look at as a reduction.
How many deans of students are there?
9.
Right? One at each school?
Each elementary,
Each?
middle school, and Northwest High School.
Okay.
We have library assistants. Like I said, with the librarians, the library assistants work in the libraries on a daily basis. They're interacting with students, they're reading to students, they're checking books out, they're monitoring the library, they're teaching lessons as kids come into the library, but we do have library assistants. And then one of the other things that we looked at was changing the elementary start time, and this has multiple ramifications, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time kind of talking through that. When we opened the new elementaries, we adjusted the start time and the structure of the elementary school day. It extended the school day for students, so students had extra time in the building, extra time for instruction, and extra time for that remediation and enrichment. It also moved the plan bells for the elementary teachers to be staggered throughout the school day, so that the elementary principals were able to go sit with first grade, sit with second grade, sit with third grade, and have those data-driven instructional conversations like our middle schools and high schools do with their grade levels and departments. If we changed the elementary start time and went back to the schedule we had before we opened the new buildings, it would reduce the student school day, and the students would have less time in school. It would move all of our elementary teacher plan time to the beginning of the day. So with all of them planning at the beginning of the day, our principals would not have the ability to meet individually with grade levels on a frequent basis to help work with them on the data-driven decisions and have a pulse on what's going on and helping them with their instruction. Changing that start time, because we would move all the plan times to the beginning of the day, it would reduce the number of specials that the elementary students would need, their elective classes. So the students right now in elementary have art, music, phys ed. They have an instructional technology class where they learn a lot of technology around Google and applications and some basic coding and some STEM-like activities. And we have the library media assistants who run the libraries, and when kids come in, they're working, our elementary librarian provides them lessons for literacy, and they're actually teaching lessons to kids and working with them on literacy-based outcomes, reading. And so by moving the elementary plan time to the beginning of the day, we wouldn't need as many specials, and so we would reduce the tech assistant and the library media assistant. So by changing the start time, there's a lot of things that happen. You reduce 2 groups of assistants, library media and technology. You change all teacher plan time to the beginning of the day. You reduce the hours and minutes that students are in the school. So that one had a lot of prongs to it when we started to unpack that. And then we have our alternative location, Northwest Passage. Northwest Passage serves middle school and high school students, and it works with students who are on a blended approach and students who are on suspension and expulsion, who are still coming to get their education so that they're not falling behind, so that when they re-enter off of suspension or expulsion, they are still with their peers in the curriculum where they need to be, and they're not falling behind academically during that time. So we could remove Northwest Passage to a remote option. It would reduce the amount of services they do. They work a lot with our social worker and really building a social network around at-risk students who might need additional support. So those were all of the things that, as we worked through our process, were things that we talked about, but everything that we talked about, as I mentioned, has ramifications for impacts in other areas. So if you don't have any questions about what I've gone through, I'm going to let Todd take it from here and go through the recommendations that are being brought to you.
I think you did a great job. Thank you, Darryl.
Yeah, we wanted to let Darryl go first so you had an understanding of what position did, being in HR, writing the job descriptions, doing the hiring for these folks. Very important, because it's very important that you understand that any person on here is an employee of our district. They're a very valued member of our district. This was not meant to call people out, make them seem less. As I sit here and listen through some of it, it still is, it's outstanding how many services we provide. What this, however, comes down to is the state pays with its funding for a basic education. Anything above a basic education, we have to raise to a levy. If you go back to our November levy, a lot of the questions surrounding that levy was, what do we get if we pass this? And we told them, we will maintain some of what we currently have, but we still have to reduce 2.6 million because we are currently spending more than we are being given by the state of Ohio. This is a separate conversation altogether from the additional cuts that could be coming from the state related to COVID. So this, I want folks to understand, everything Darryl's mentioned here is not the final, but things on here could be on the final list that I'm getting ready to recommend. Our purpose of going through this is so they could see everything that was considered, so they could see that everything was collaborative as we looked at it and tried to work toward a final solution. But Darryl and I, as we've talked about this 100 times, we don't see positions, we see faces. We have outstanding employees in our district, and that's what makes this so difficult. Very, very difficult. So the final recommendations that I will make, and they're not final until voted on next Monday, June 22nd, which at the end of this meeting, we will need a motion to add a board meeting for June 22nd. But we wanted to do it a week in advance, so one, Darryl could start to look at the list, because whoever's on these lists of what the final decisions are, there's bumping rights, depending on where they are, or if there's more people in their department. Some of the things he read on here, there's just one per district, so there are no bumping rights. But we have to get prepared to that, but it also gives people time to contact you if they have questions or concerns, and time to contact us if they have questions or concerns.
And not to interrupt, but just to reiterate, anybody that's on this, if they go to their building principal or assistant principal, those people should not be surprised about any of this because they were part of this decision making, correct?
Shouldn't be surprised at all.
And everyone whose position is potentially impacted was given a phone call, either by myself or their building administrator, so they knew that their position was being considered.
Yeah, so everyone reached out last Thursday and Friday, so they had a heads up that their name would appear on the list that we recommend tonight. This PowerPoint that we have up will be emailed out either later tonight or first thing tomorrow morning. It is also part of the Waycross presentation. So the recommendations, and Chris, I'm going to the page that says recommendation at the top. The following is our recommendations for reduction in force due to our expenditures not matching what the state is giving us for funding. First of all, obviously, the recommendation is current resignations and retirements that Daryl talked about at the beginning. A French teacher, a Northwest High School tutor, a CHS receptionist, CHS secretary, director of curriculum, Northwest High School physical education teacher, district office technology assistant, district office receptionist, and reduced contract for SRO with Colerain Township Police. Please understand with these reductions, it may look different next year when you call administrative office, a phone recording will pick up the phone. And so we will try to do our best to make sure that we divvy up the responsibilities of those we're not replacing and make sure that we cover the amount of work that needs to be done. Understand with the resource officers at our schools, White Oak Middle School, Green Township works closely with them, plus our Northwest Passage Hamilton County Sheriff goes back and forth with White Oak and there. Colerain Middle has one, Pleasant Run Middle has one, Colerain High School will have one now, and Northwest High School will have now one. So, additional days. Our recommendation is to reduce the extra duty days. And again, this does affect what's done before or after school. If you are a counselor, there are also other folks in our district who have extra duty days, but it would be paying them for the 185-day contract and not any extra duty days. 3 third-shift custodians, elementary office assistants, which is 5 positions, elementary assistant and the alternative learning program, which is another 5 positions, half of the intervention specialist. All of this is very important to what goes on a daily basis, but what it comes down to is we don't have the funding to support it. So these have to be reduced, and yes, as you have asked and made good comments, it has to be picked up by somebody else. 2 librarians. This doesn't mean that our libraries won't be open, won't be functioning. We'll still check out books. We'll still have people be able to check in books. Our libraries are very important to us, especially in lieu of us having a literacy initiative. All inclusion assistants, 24 positions total, of which we didn't fill all of them as we tried to hire them because people, we couldn't find the right fits for those. So even though it says 24, not all of them were filled. The facility manager at Colerain High School. Middle school guidance secretaries, 3 positions, 1 at each middle school. The tutors at Northwest High School. If you'll notice, the other thing that Daryl has worked very hard on over the past year and a half is our right-size staffing plan, making sure we have the same at each school. We don't have tutors at Colerain High School. We now will not have tutors, if this is approved by the board, at Northwest High School. The facility manager at Colerain High School would be removed, and we don't have that position at Northwest High School. 1 elementary gifted teacher, and due to the numbers, if you qualify, 1 teacher will split between 2 buildings and still be able to offer gifted services. An unskilled maintenance position. So the total reductions of everything listed on the PowerPoint in salaries are $2.183 million. If you add benefits to that, we're at $2.521 million. With retirements that we are expecting for next year and other areas, we will be above the 2.6 and be able to meet the reduction package that we said we would look at as we move forward. Amy, Daryl, anything you would like to add?
I would just say that as we were here, I was corrected. One of our intervention assistants reached out. They also support math intervention, not just reading. So they do primarily reading, but they also support math. So I want to correct myself on that as well and thank her for reaching out and clarifying.
And I want to just clarify again and again, they do a lot. Anybody who's on this list, it is unbelievable what they provide for our students. It just comes down to the state provides a basic education.
And I want to say that while all these positions are very difficult to make these decisions, as a district, we've been in operating deficit for several years. We went out to our community and asked for a significantly large levy, and we told our community that at the same time we could not ask for enough, and we knew we had to make reductions internally to our operations. And so that's what this is. This has nothing to do with state reductions. This is that our needs as a district are much greater than the funding both by state and local. Currently, locally still doesn't pay for the whole basic education. We're about 50% of the 60. We used to be at 40, so we did come up some, but we're still working to get there. So we have to make reductions internally in order to balance our budget.
Sure. But I think through this process, we started using the word right sizing, and there's two optics with right sizing. There's a right sizing for Amy's department, which is the finance department, make sure that we're being sensible fiscal partners for our community. And then there's the right sizing for our kids' needs. And that right sizing is the one that cuts to the bone, because it is a loss. And so as we've been talking through this and having the meetings, I was kind of thinking of that right sizing is a difficult word.
Very
because
much
you just
so.
don't. On the inclusion assistants, I know that some of them work with the special needs. Is there any way that we could, if these reductions are through, can we work on like, and Daryl, I know you're real big in social services, the wraparound services. Can we get like interns from UC or Xavier University? Because between UC and Xavier, they pump out a significant amount of social service folks. Can we have that as a opportunity to still provide this service, but not have it on the books as a salary and benefit?
So we can. So all of the services through the IEP, none of those have been reduced. So the inclusion assistants are above and beyond the IEP. They're not in the IEP. They're not a one-on-one. They're not a related service. It's a service that we provided to try to support the entire classroom, but primarily working with students with disabilities on that, being able to be focused in class, redirect, calm down, study with them, support their emotional development, and they do a lot. The list is much longer than any job description could include.
Sure.
We could look at partnerships, but the kind of support we would get from the universities where they would want to place their students for credit for their work, we can work with them to see if that would meet the requirements for that. I'm not sure they'd be able to get their hours toward their certification that they're working toward, but we could work with them on options. We've also worked with different organizations, like at the elementaries, we have some additional support through a grant we have with the YWCA to have additional social emotional support in 3 of our buildings through a grant. So we're continuing to look for other funding sources as well to help support some of those needs.
Okay, great, thank you. Anything else, Todd?
Any other questions? That's all we have.
I just think, as always, when there is not one cut that's an easy cut, and you look at all of this, and even the resignations and retirements, eliminating a position is still going to ask someone else that's already working very hard to do even more work. So I know as the people that this is directly affecting, it's easy to say to not take this personal, because how could you not? Very dedicated employees. I just, knowing that we truly collaborated and our buildings had input, because I know there was a bigger list, and with the input with the buildings and the building administrators, were able to, because all of us up here, we don't know what each individual building needs. We don't know how to prioritize. So I think it looks like you've done a very good job with the collaboration to go with the list and let it point to which one would be the least hurtful, which is hard to even say, because you can't look at any of these. They all directly impact kids. All of them, even in unskilled maintenance in one way or another, directly impacts kids. But lots of times people love to throw out there, the little catchphrase of, you gotta think outside the box, you gotta think outside the box. Well, I think we're gonna see that in ways to get creative on how to cover this. And one of the examples, and I know the counselors aren't happy, and I understand you work very hard, and you come in, you work 13 extra days, and that's always been an extra contract, and you earn every penny of that. But I commend you that I think you have thought outside the box, the fact that, I don't usually hear of school districts that do give comp time. So the fact that, and yeah, it's going to be hard. It's like, with most jobs, you take a vacation and you come back, and after day one back, you think, was I on a vacation? Because so much got behind while you were gone. But at least we're able to offer something in place of that. So whoever came up with that, I think that that was an example of thinking outside the box. That's all.
Daryl, just want to ask a question here about, I know it was very painful for you guys to deal with this. However, because of COVID, do you anticipate more cuts coming down the pipe?
This proposal tonight is about, and I appreciate what Mark said about the right sizing. We're not right sizing because we're overstaffed. We're right sizing to our budget, not right sizing to our needs.
Okay.
But based on what happens with future reductions from the state because of COVID, there could be and will be more cuts coming based on what happens with state budget. And we haven't gotten notice yet from the state as what our next round of cuts will be from them.
Yeah, I have a comment. It seems to me, when you say right sizing, we're attempting to match revenue. And I know there's people that, think that we have the money, we can spend it on these things, why aren't we? And I think Amy has demonstrated that in her, 5-year forecast, that deficit spending isn't a sustainable business model going forward. So, none of these are, feel-good decisions in any way, shape, or form. The only other, to avoid these is to, increase revenue. And, increased revenue is, outside funding from the state, which is, they're cutting, not adding, asking for another levy, which we just did. Can you give an update, Todd, on what our properties that we own that we're trying to shed?
So right now, the properties that are in our possession, the Welch Elementary property is in the process of being developed as discussed. It's been slowed down by COVID, and it's taken a lot of teamwork in collaboration with Springfield Township to get the housing development that will be put in there for Welch. So that takes care of that property. Right now, there is no interest in the Beavis property, and we are currently planning on using this to our full extent for next year and the year after, because to move us and put us somewhere else, you have to have money to build or add on to get us going there. I will tell you though, COVID has shined a little bit of a light for me, and I think Amy's department, on some of the things that maybe doesn't need office space, but jobs can still be done. So maybe not needing the office space that we once thought. But we do have Houston as a great option to add on. We have researched that and we have looked at that, but right now we just don't have the funding to move that property or this property. This is very valuable property because of where it's located and because of the sewer system and the water and the drainage. There's not much access left on Corrine Avenue with all the businesses, so there has been some interest in this facility. But in order for any of that to happen, we've got to have somewhere for us to go and add on to.
But along with using this property, we're also no longer leasing property on Springdale Road, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, when we moved Northwest Passage over here, we got rid of that lease.
but we are still marketing our available properties.
Yes, Chris
As
McKee
you
is.
said, there's not been interest in the moment.
Yeah, Mark, I just wanted to comment that, like Matt said, this is not easy. And I want to commend Daryl and Todd and Amy and their whole group, because, this is not easy. This is not easy for the 5 of us that have to vote, for someone to lose their job or, monetarily, cut their pay. It's not an easy thing, and, like you said, we need to right size where we're at. And it's not the amount of employees, it's the funding that we're not getting enough of. So, don't think out there that this is easy, because it's not.
And Mark, I do want to clarify that one thing that one of the things that's on the recommendation is the 3 third shift custodians from the elementary. But based on where we are with the additional needs around COVID and cleaning and sanitation, we would maintain them through federal funds until the pandemic ends and the federal funds are out, and then we reduce the custodians. So their
So you would be coming out of
salaries would
general
be
fund.
shifted into federal funds and then reduced when the federal funds run out, so that we can maintain the safety and the cleaning that's going to be needed as we start to think about a transition back from the remote learning. So I just want to clarify that
Yeah,
those
so
positions will be cut, but there'll be a future cut.
So it shows as a reduction, but it's because the CARES funding is taking care of it till we get through the COVID process. And then some of the updates, I'll give you my superintendent's update on what reopening looks like.
And I think, you know, I keep harping about this collaboration thing. The reason I say this, and I think I said it in our weekly meeting, is when we went through the levy, we had staff that was not so supportive of the levy because they felt disjointed and not connected. And I just don't want to see that. Like, I just don't want to see that. We are coming into a season, I don't think we'll ever be in a spot where we have the money we need to do what we need to do. And so to do that and to ask people to invest into our organization, they have to feel included. And not so much that it becomes, you become so inclusive that you stall the process. But people have a say because they do invest. One thing I've learned about education is people, when they engage, they emotionally engage first. You know, I've said all along, teachers have a different heart. It's completely different than anything I've seen. And so my vision for this, for our district, is that everybody's arm in arm. And when we make these decisions, we march forward collectively as a group, no matter how painful it is. So that's my challenge to everybody, not just the AO team, but our educators, our administrators, everybody. Because the amount of energy it takes to complain and bicker and do all these things just take away from the synergy of the organization. And certainly I understand why people are upset about reductions. 100%. It's just, I want the best for our district, and I think the best is everybody being somewhat on the same page. That's all. Next, we have student services info, potential calendar revision for
Yes.
2021.
At the last Board of Education meeting, we talked about an adjusted start to the school year, which was first listed as September 1st. Since collaborating with our administrators and our principals, there was some big concern, especially at the secondary buildings, especially our high schools, that, fingers crossed, OHSA will release athletes to start regular conditioning, practice, and everything come August 1 with certain regulations and rules we have to follow. So with that being said, this is a calendar with a potential start date of August 27th. And so earlier, a community member asked what changes besides the delayed start. As you can see from the calendar that is attached to the board meeting agenda, we would now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days of in-service prior to school starting. And some people might say, come on, just get them back to school. Well, it's now June 15th, and I'm not making excuses, but we still don't have a reopening plan. In order to plan for reopening, we need the governor to give us some guidance. When that occurs, I would like everybody to think about what currently is going on. And this will kind of lead into some of my update. But right now, you can only put 24 kids on a school bus. So again, you're going to the school bus driver, recognizing the kids as they get on the bus. What should they be looking for? Will they actually be responsible for scanning with a laser to see what temperatures are? If they see somebody who's not looking well, would they ask them questions? Who do they report to once they get back to school? At 24 per bus, you create an equity gap that I do not want and will not allow to have. I am constantly emailing legislators, our governor, trying to get them to understand that you, by limiting transportation, you're creating an equity gap on getting kids to school. Let's go to the 2-mile bus radius. Well, what you do there is you punish the kids who don't have cars and don't have a means to get to school anyway. Is it a way to save money? Yes. Is it something we may have to look at in the future? Yes. But the one thing we can control is putting 50 on a bus. If we have to, for that piece, require them to wear a mask till they get to school. But I think a lot of it depends on how the reopening goes. Are kids truly just caring, or are they getting it, and what is it mutating to as we go through? Then you think, as kids arrive at school, how many entries are you allowed to have? Because I think pretty much we're going to be required to check the temperature of every child. So we've got to laser check them or go through a thermometer to see how things are going. Are they required masks or not? I just want everybody to know that we have priced masks. If we have to provide masks for employees and students, it will cost the district $2.1 million
For the whole year?
for the whole year. So I don't think, my personal opinion is that students will be required unless parents want to supply them. And that's the other thing. Please, please, please be very careful. You don't criticize or point the finger or bring things of personal beliefs into situations. If a kid shows up to school in a mask, they show up to school in a mask, whether they're required. If they're required to, they have to. But if they're not, the last thing we want is other kids and other parents saying things like, that's ridiculous, why are they doing that? They're doing what they believe is appropriate. We are also providing a remote learning opportunity for any parent who doesn't want to send their kid to school. Some parents have already reached out to us. They have 3 and 4 kids in their family. They do not want them going to school next year. They want remote learning for the entire year. House Bill 164, like you talked about, will allow us to offer that incentive for the year. So that confuses things. So how many teachers do you need because of remote learning? Once they get into the building, are we allowed to go to lunchrooms? What spacing do we need? Can we feed them in their classrooms? Is that an alternative? Until we get this reopening plan, we don't know, but we've got to have time at the beginning of the school year to practice routines, to practice other things, to make sure we can do the reopening in an efficient, safe, and effective method. Not only are we worried about our students' safety, which is our number one, but our staff is right there with number one also. Our staff have to be safe. They have to feel secure. We have to meet their needs also. So this calendar allows the first 8 days to be for professional development, to be for collaboration with teachers. It's not something where we're going to sit there and plan out their day by day, hour by hour. They're going to have time to work on their building principles with their leadership teams. How will school look for us? What are the ways of entry? You have to have a COVID room. So if somebody shows one of the symptoms, we have to have a designated area for them to be isolated and put. How many can fit in that room? How many rooms will we need? If we have a breakout in a school, what does that look like? All of these things we're planning for and trying to be proactive. But until we get a reopening plan from the governor, and we're asking just like you, well, when's that coming out? It was supposed to come out last week. Had some meetings with some superintendents and canceled it because they didn't cover everything they thought they should. It was looking at this week, so it's either by the end of this week or next week is what we're looking at. So by that time, we're going to have about 2 months to make sure we can meet all the requirements, plus what's going to change. I don't ever want to bring pro sports into it, but like Jim and I were talking today at lunch during negotiations, a pro football player got it. Well, they have the ability to isolate, test everybody on the team immediately, and get them right back to practice. Our athletes, sooner or later, probably are going to test positive. Our staff members at a school are going to test positive sooner or later. How do we deal with that? What are we allowed to do? How much notification needs to go out? Parents need help. We've got to look at a way, how do we get a 24-hour hotline where, hey, it's 5:30 in the morning, my kid's got this and this symptom, they need somebody to talk to. Hey, what do you think? What should we do here? And all we do is mark it as excused because they might have a symptom, but what's the reopening guidelines? You got to stay home 3 days before you come, you got to stay home 5, and then we can provide remote learning for them. We want our computers to go back and forth to school, but please understand, as a community member and a family member and as a board, we want 100% return to school if at all possible. But there's so many things affecting that right now, we can't commit to that 100%. We're planning for every alternative there is. But this calendar is the possibility of what I might bring back to you in July and say, can we get a final approval after we find out what the reopening is, after we find out how reopening Ohio is going. I talked to the Hamilton County Commissioner on a superintendent call Friday. They said right now it's not that bad. It's a 0.9 reproduction rate, then it's a 1.1, then it's a 1.0. They thought as people went outside and weren't contained inside houses where it's easier to spread, that it might go down for a little bit, because there will also be peaks. They still don't know what to think of what's going on in other states as they see peaks and why it's not hit Ohio yet, but they say it could at any time. So I just want everybody to understand our goal is 100% return to school. We want sports. We need people in stands because we need the band out there marching. We need them going to two-a-days, having their band practices all hours of the night, because that's what high school's about. We need our kids back in school so we can provide enrichment, remediation for whatever they lost at the end of the year, and that's the way we're pushing, and that's what this calendar reflects. The only difference is more professional development at the beginning of the year. So that's why I put it on here, so people are aware and know that we are talking about this, and it is a very close discussion.
So in this counter proposal, where you say the 27th is the return to school, but it's actually the student phase-in? Can you
Yeah, so some
talk
of
about
our
that a little more?
schools, like ninth grade orientation, they bring ninth graders in first.
Okay.
Middle schools will bring sixth graders in first. We have kindergarten orientation, so it could be a phase-in plan. We're still working on the logistics to see what our building leadership teams and our administrators think's the best.
Okay. Because on this calendar, it's listed over a 4-day period.
Yep.
And then all students on the second and third.
Correct.
return.
So yes, students would, remember, high schools are going to be swarming come August 1. So we figure with that amount in there, high school is really concerned. They're already back, so if they're doing well and things are going well, and that's the other big key, how are they doing all back together?
They're already
So-
doing things in small groups now.
Yep, yep.
Right.
Anything else? Pam?
Okay. No.
Joe? Next item is the school handbooks.
Yes, this is information only. These are the handbooks we need approved for next school year for each school. If you have any questions, please let me know and we'll get your answers, but they are for information only. We'll bring them back at the next meeting for action. And then I've pretty much covered everything I had in my superintendent's update. The only thing is we need a motion to have a special meeting on June 22nd and time and location. I'm assuming same location, same time, your meeting, whatever you'd like.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to have a meeting on next Monday, June 22nd, here at the AO at 6:30.
Second.
Okay, so are we going to do that, or do you want me to insert it?
Do a little verbal.
Do a verbal? Okay. So there's a motion and a second. Any questions, comments? Chris, can you take the vote?
Mr. Gilbert?
Aye.
Mr. Bessel?
Aye.
Mr. Kiesler?
Aye.
Mrs. Bessel?
Aye.
Mr. Yushamara?
Aye.
5-0, thank you. And the last thing we have here is board member comments. Joe?
I just want to say that I'm overwhelmed by the presentation by Daryl and Todd, and it pains me because this is what we have to do. And I hope the people who are affected by this whole thing, please understand we're doing this for a reason. And like I said, it does pain me. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Jim?
Just reiterate what I said earlier to Todd and Daryl about in their team to get everybody their opinion, principals, BLT team, and get everybody involved. Like Mark, like you said, get everybody involved with the decisions and that. And you know, like Joe said, this is not easy. This is painful.
Yeah.
It really is when you have to make a vote like this. So, and that's it.
Thank you, Jim. Matt?
Yeah, I'd just like to pretty much concur with, what Jim and Joe just said, and, don't really have anything much to add that I haven't already said earlier in the meeting. It's not easy decisions, but decisions that need to be made regardless. Thank you.
Thanks. Pam?
I said most of it too, but again, anyone that doesn't think that, anybody that has any part of making these decisions doesn't feel sick to their stomach, they just don't get it. Everybody cares about education, and everybody cares about staff, the entire staff. And it's not even the night to vote, and I'm just glad I didn't eat much, because honestly, it makes you feel sick to your stomach when you have to do this, especially how much so many of us rallied and worked so hard to pass that levy last fall. And then it's hard to not go back and think, thank goodness we passed that, or this would be even more devastating. But it's frustrated that we just can't seem to get ahead. And then, Todd, I know I'd already asked you, but just wanted to mention again, I have had several staff members that have reached out that said, please don't, they've heard that number, the 2.1 million it would cost to get masks for all the students and the kids, and, these are just some individuals, but they have said, as a staff member, I do not want the district to feel like they have to provide my mask. I'm already wearing a mask. I will provide my own mask, and any way to help, but that's a small way they can help as well. That's all.
Great, thanks, Pam. For me, it's frustrating that we pass a levy and we're here we are again, and we'll probably be in this situation in the next couple months, looking at other opportunities. And I guess the thing that just frustrates me is we have, state leadership that will defund a school, cut the school, but then fund other things that just seems the priorities of, the future leadership and our children always get the back end of the deal. And I don't think that'll change. I mean, I guess until there's a upheaval, groundswell of people who are just tired of it. I have to say, in my first 3 years, that's the most surprising thing I've ever seen in my entire life. That it seems like this is just a revolving table, that we come back to this because, it literally goes day to day, whether you're where you thought you were or where you fall significantly behind. My heart goes out to any of the folks that we have to make a decision about. We can sit here and apologize, and we do apologize. It's very difficult decisions, very, very difficult decisions, and we really are trying our best to make the right decisions. So I thank everybody that's been part of that.
Can I have one thing?
Sure.
I know I shouldn't, but I'm going to. This is times, and I know I'm beating a dead horse, but I'm just going to say it. I've been on this board over 22 years, and this is times when we have to sit here and make these cuts and look and know all these people are going to lose their jobs, and it's going to affect our students, that when the township doesn't work with us with tips, that 1.2 million that we lost on that Pumpkin tip would have been almost half of what we just did. We need to keep that in mind and stay on the township when they try to bring tips to us, because you don't think $1 million here, $1 million there. Well, if we, 1.2 million, I believe it was, and I might be saying the wrong amount, but at least $1 million we lost on that we were promised they were going to make good to us. And it never happened. And this is where we are. Sorry, but I can't sit and not say it. Thank you.
No need to apologize. Truth is truth.
Executive session.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
The board will approve a motion to move into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, and to prepare for, conduct, or review negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the motion to move into executive session as listed.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. We'll take a call for a vote. And that vote passes 5-0. So we will go into executive session. We will come back and adjourn the meeting. No other discussion once we come back will be had other than to disband the meeting. Thank
And
you.
we will keep this video running until executive session comes back for
Okay, great.
our attorneys.
Thank you. There's no further agenda items to discuss other than adjourning the meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Let me get to this, sorry. Yeah. All right, who had the first motion?
I did so moved.
Was it Matt? Okay, thanks.
Joe had
Joe
the second. vote.
And we all agree to adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Watched our board meeting this evening. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the administrative office for anything. Thank you.